All right, kids and parents, volunteers, and other people listening in, we're going to do a short three-part discussion on kind of a introduction to getting to know the Puritans. And I'm going to start with just a very general introduction and commending a few people to you to kind of get your feet wet, and some people that I think are very good to start with if you're interested in learning more about the Puritans. These are Christians from England, and especially in the 17th and some later 18th century, but mainly the 17th century. And so there's some people to commend to you. And so this is going to be an introduction on the Puritans, and then just some people I'm going to commend to you, and then I'm going to break it down into maybe two other little short videos on some individuals and their books, and it's kind of like a little short biography on them. So the Puritans are English Christians that were part of what's called the Nonconformist movement, in which King Charles II and other members of Parliament in England at the time basically were locking down any practice of Christian piety outside the Church of England. And there was a great conflict at the time, into the sense of we could use the word corrupt, we could use the word dead spiritually in the Church of England at the time. Obviously, a reaction to King Henry the Eighth, basically declaring the church to be separate from Rome based upon his desire to marry again and divorce again. And so this is clearly an issue on integrity, on spiritual holiness, on following God's commands. And obviously the king was using the church against herself. And so these folks were basically good Christians that would not kind of toe the line with allowing the church to be apprehended by political parties. Sound familiar? It's kind of the tale as old as time, where the church kind of gets used as a handmaiden, an instrument of political power and warmongering and things like that are just horrific. And as the church, we have to fight against that every generation. We really do, because it's so easy for the church just to side with a party or a king or a power, and try to find more ways to win influence and make friends, as people like to say, instead of being obedient to the Lord. And we don't want to make a ruckus just for the sake of it, y'all, but we do need to stand for what is true and fight what is evil and resist the proud, and as humble people who have received God's grace, to proclaim what is good and right and righteous. So the Puritans are very well known for their stand for what is holy and it has integrity, and faithful preaching of God's word. At the same time, fighting back against a political power that was tyrannical, And again, this is kind of a point that doesn't get brought up a lot about the Puritans, is most of them went to jail. Most of them suffered greatly. Many of them died as martyrs. Many of them were executed as martyrs. People love to talk about the devotional literature of the Puritans, but what about the martyrdom and the death of many Puritans, both in Scotland, in England, and Wales, and in Ireland, that loved God and that died for the Lord? Puritans are more than just devotional classics. They are examples for us on how to live a Christian life in the midst of an uncertain world, and in the midst of political regimes that are trying to apprehend the Christian vote and the Christian witness and the Christian church, and utilize it for itself, and militarize it for itself, mobilize it for itself. So the Puritans have much to offer us, and I'm the first to say I'm not some Puritan scholar or know all these things about all these Puritans, but I know enough, and I've been impacted greatly by a handful of them. So I'm going to suggest to a lot of you first in this little intro, if you are really interested in digging into the Puritans, whether you're a teenager or you're a parent and a volunteer, I want to commend to you first, just to get to know the Puritans. There are many, and traditionally there are Puritans that we would say come from primarily England, but also Scotland, sometimes also in Holland, the Dutch Puritans, and then also there are some Puritans in America that kind of carry on the tradition. But not in a traditional sense because of the time period they don't really live within. But many people have the Puritan spirit, okay, because the Puritans came to America, right, with the landing from the Mayflower. So Puritans have a huge impact on our American heritage, on our thinking about God, on our thoughts about how to do church. They're very influential, and sometimes not always for the best, but much more good than bad. Okay, so I want to just kind of introduce and commend the Puritans to you, and if you're really interested in kind of learning more about the Puritans, there is just an invaluable amount of good resources out there on the Puritans. And I would commend to you one great publisher. Well, there's two great publishers on the Puritans. The first is the Banner of Truth Trust. And the Banner of Truth Trust is led by Ian Murray, and he has been publishing books in his trust, from his trust, since the 50s. And they're just a wealth. Again, I commend to you their publication ministry. They have so many good books. And don't just buy them, read them. There's a lot of people I know that buy a lot of Puritan books and they never really read a lot of them. Read them. Learn about the Puritans through their books. And, Banner of Truth also publishes a lot of really handsome-looking books. Some people think they're kind of boring looking. I think they're kind of beautiful, actually. Many are paperback, many are cloth bound. I love cloth bound books, but their paperbacks are very sturdy and reliable. Okay, so the second publisher is called Reformation Heritage Books, RHB, and I think Reformation Heritage is just such a blessing to the Church of Jesus because it publishes not only its own books, but tons of hard-to-find books, again, reprints they're called. And you can find all sorts of good stuff. And then all the older kind of publishers that have all the kind of good stuff, the old stuff, they just collect them all. I'm not sure what these guys do with their time. Do they ever spend time with their families? I don't know. We're not sure what they're doing, but they're publishing books, writing books, finding books, selling books. It's pretty neat. So Reformation Heritage Books, and they just came out with a few years back just an incredible resource on biographies. As you know me, I love biographies. I think they're so important for Christians to read. And this came out, I think it was 2015. Let me check real fast on the book. I think it's 2015. No, oh my gosh, 2006. That's how old it is. So it's been out for a while now. It's like 15 years. So this book called Meet the Puritans. This book is, you're like, oh my gosh, it's so thick, it's huge. Yeah, it's big because there's a lot of biographies in it. And most of the biographies are 2 to 10 pages. There's, Jonathan Edwards gets 40 pages, and John Owen gets 20 pages, and John Bunyan gets 10, and, some of the great Puritans get a lot more love, okay? But there's so many, I'm not saying insignificant. There's so many important Puritans that are in this book, and what's so cool about this is they give you this really, really short biography of the Puritan, their life. Then it gives a commentary on their most significant books, and it tells you who publishes them. It tells you what the best versions are. I mean, it's amazing. It's like countless thousands of hours that these guys did that you can just benefit from by spending $25 on. So again, this is, I think, one of the absolute best books on just getting to know Puritans. And again, the Puritans have had a significant impact on Christianity. For those of you that think the main doctrine of salvation is the doctrine of conversion, that primarily, not only, but primarily comes from Puritans. Not saying it's a bad thing, it's a good thing. They kind of get hyper-focused on it, though. If you're a Presbyterian, you're like, I don't know if I like that. But they really focus a lot on the doctrine of conversion. They also really take Christian discipline very seriously. Even John Calvin didn't make that actually a mark of the church, which is kind of interesting. There's kind of traditionally 3 marks of the church, the word, the sacrament, and church discipline. John Calvin actually did not include church discipline as part of the mark of the church. But the Westminster Confession did, right? The Puritans did, because they don't want there to be an antinomian kind of culture in the sense of kind of a lawlessness, kind of a carnality, right? And I think the Westminster Divines were right. We need to be careful of the carnality of ourselves and our hearts. So the Puritans are so good, but it's so daunting. I remember for so many years, I really wanted to read the Puritans and get more into them, but there's just this nebulous, universe of like, where do I even begin? It's just, who do I begin with? And it's so challenging. Now, if you've read anything by J.I. Packer, you've already read a Puritan. He's basically a modern-day Puritan. And there's many others that are kind of modern-day Puritans. Paul Washer, I kind of like Paul Washer. Some really good modern day people that kind of have that spirit of being a Puritan. But really, the traditional people, they're hard to figure out of like, where do I start? So I want to tell you to start, literally just to start, with this book, Meet the Puritans by Joel Beakey and Randall Peterson. I mean, this book is so good. And again, you don't need to be super smart or well read to read this book. It's basically a collection of biographies, and then you can pick and choose who you want to start to understand better and read, and what books are good, and you'll find it fascinating. It's so neat. I've been reading through this book quite a bit, even recently, just to kind of dive into some different Puritans, and it's just illuminating. It's to me, Christian biographies are so vibrant. When you see how God's worked in people's lives, you see where God's taken people from, you see where God's pulled people out of, you see how God's used people, and it's just incredible. And sometimes it's definitely more exciting than our own lives, right, in some ways. But God is working in every Christian's life in some exciting way, in some sense, and also in some sorrowful place He's working in, right? But it's nice to read how He's done that in some wonderful, matchless people in that period of time that went through a whole lot, suffered a whole lot. Many of them became martyrs for the faith. And so I want to commend to you the Puritans as a group. It's not a denomination. It's a group of Christian leaders during what's called the period of nonconformity, where many pastors wouldn't conform to the way that the kings of England and of course, Scotland and others wanted them to. They wanted them just to kind of toe the line and kind of, invest in the way that they were doing church. And they were like, we're not going to have any of that. Absolutely not. It goes against our conscience. It goes against the Word of God. It goes against integrity of ministry. We're not going to do that. So these people are nonconformists, and that's why they're called Puritans, because they wanted to purify the church. And that's why many of them, including the Huguenots, the French Huguenots from France, left the continent and left the British Isles, and they came to America. They were looking for religious freedom, right? And it's worth fighting for. It's worth leaving a country for, I think. Religious freedom is so important. And so the Puritans have left in just an incredible heritage for us, and we need to learn from them. So in the next couple videos, I'm going to commend a couple specific Puritans to you and some places on how to start, where to start. But the best beginning, the best very kind of ground level, where do I start, is reading some basic, short, brief biographies of many different Puritans, so you can find out kind of where you want to jump in or who interests you a lot. So, all right, till next time.